Oh man, that music makes me so mellow. It makes me, just kind of want to have decaf coffee rather than caffeinated coffee. I think it's good morning, everybody. If it might be the middle of the night still, and that just might have been some sort of lurid dream about a woman I saw 40 years ago who smiled at me, and I thought she was smiling at me, and I never forgot to smile. Hey, good morning, everybody. Law and Legitimacy. It's Tuesday. Buckle your seatbelts because at 3 p.m. Eastern time, that Donald will be cracking his way into a Miami federal court to be arraigned. Does that portend the end of Western civilization as we know it? Will it be the great unraveling of the United States Constitution, an invitation to totalitarianism, the end of all we cherish as Americans? Come on. No, he's going to be arraigned. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I gather people are celebrating in Denver, and I know that Mike's got celebration on his mind, and I can just sense his "I told you so" gene becoming dominant. Mike, what up with the Denver Nuggets last night?
Denver Nuggets did it, Game 5. So they took the series on a 4-1 basis. The franchise earns its first NBA title in its history, which you love to see that. You love to see young franchises get over the hump. Denver's been on the map really since they drafted, I think I've said this before, Carmelo Anthony back in the early 2000s. Same draft that one LeBron James came into the league. Those two had some really epic battles in high school. Via Oak Hill Academy for Carmelo Anthony and then St. Vincent St. Mary for LeBron James. But the man on the screen is who deserves the accolades this morning. That's Nikola Jokic, the Serbian, who has surged this season and proven to be the league's, what I would consider to be the league's most dominant talent. I think that he is perhaps the best player on earth. He's a walking triple-double. I think last night his stat line was something like 28 points, 16 rebounds. And it wasn't the best showing for the Denver Nuggets, but I think that that's a testament to how dominant of a team they were. I think they won by 5 points. They trailed most of the game. I think it was tied at halftime, but they were down in many stretches of the game, and still pulled it out in the end. I'm really happy to see this. I think if you're a Miami Heat fan, you can't be too disappointed, even though, who am I talking to, right? You were there, you had a shot, but did you really? Did you really? You overperformed. You got to be happy that you'll get, your star Tyler Hero back. You've got an excellent coach in Eric Spoelstra. But right now, the Denver Nuggets are going to ride on assembling a killer team in the Western Conference, seemingly below the surface, while everybody else was touting the Golden State Warriors, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Phoenix Suns. So good for Denver.
Well, we will keep an eye out for next year's basketball season, and our attention will now, of course, turn to Major League Baseball while we while the time away until college football season begins and the Michigan Wolverines begin yet another attempt to become the nation's dominant football program. Of course, they are historically having more wins than any other team in college football. Need I say, go blue? But in the meantime, we will focus on the faltering Yankees and their struggles in the AL East and Aaron Judge. Is he going to be the home run master of the league again this year? He's kind of plateaued at 19 homers right now, and he's in a tie for second. But on to that another day. Today's sporting event, of course, is the Trump indictment. But first, a couple hellos. I mean, Luttrell, he gets on the stream at 11 minutes before we're even on the air. Good morning, Norm. Got those competitive juices flowing. Luttrell wins. Good morning, Bathtub Liquor. Good morning, Aperture of My Soul. Good morning, T-Girl. Good morning, In the Cloud. Good morning, Freedom Lover. And good morning, I think, to my wife, who wouldn't post but is probably listening online. Oh, and good morning, Angry Dog. So we've got a lot of people on the streams this morning. Trump indicted. He's in Florida. Shake up in the legal team. Apparently, there are people who don't want to work with the Donald. People have said to me, would you take the call if it came? I'll always listen. But yeah, our phone hasn't been ringing, at least not with respect to Donald Trump. I'm back at the ordinary business of rape, murder, and mayhem. And my office will today begin picking a jury for me in a he said, she said rape contest that will begin trial, I should say. It's not a contest, that will begin in Danbury, Connecticut later this month. But in the meantime, all eyes on 3 o'clock. The arraignment, federal court, Miami. Donald Trump will answer charges that he was, is guilty of some 37 felonies, and he'll undoubtedly plead not guilty. They'll select a jury. Some new lawyers will appear. An announcement will be made that they're looking to add yet other lawyers to the term and the team, and then motion practice will begin, and the case will be teed up for trial. Mike and I have been talking about the indictment for several days now. Sunday, we spent about an hour breaking down the charges themselves and what the proof is that the government has appeared to have assembled. What to look for as a matter of law. Yesterday, we talked about the politics a little bit more. Today, apropos the Trump indictment, I want to talk about some comments I've been hearing from folks. There's a lot of hand wringing. I spoke to an older fellow yesterday, and you're thinking, older? Who can be older than you? Well, there are a few that haven't dropped off the mortal coil yet, haven't joined Ted Kaczynski in eternity. Somebody said, yesterday, oh, do you really want to see the Constitution upended? Isn't Trump's return, doesn't it portend the end of constitutionalism? And I said to this person, just stop right there. Name one constitutional provision that was undermined during the Trump presidency. I can't think of any. And if you can't, stop fussing. Somebody else, I want to see, the world is going to go off its rocker. I want to see the world improve for young people. And, if Trump is elected, there'll be more divisiveness in the country will be, or I didn't say, if they didn't say if Trump was elected, but this sideshow with respect to Trump portends deeper divisions in the country. Maybe. But I don't view Trump as the cause of them. I view him as the canary in the mine shaft. And it was the federal government's decision to charge here that places this case front and center right now. William Zimmer, I'm going to assume there's a typographical error in the message. Good morning to you. You left out the to hell. I think the more I think what you're trying to say, Mr. Zimmer, is good morning and go to hell, Buckeyes, Norm. Yes, I agree with that sentiment. Double go back to the keyboard, Mr. Zimmer, get that message straight.
I see a reference to the Ohio State University.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever noticed when you go on college campuses, my office is within, we'll get back to Trump in a minute. My office is within eyesight of the Yale campus. And so I am often stunned to see the number of kids wandering around on campus with Yale paraphernalia on. Like, where do you think you are? Yes, I'm glad I'm at Yale, but I got to wear that. How do you know Columbus, Ohio is the home of learning impaired people? Because they don't have to just say Ohio State. They have to say the Ohio State University, as though there might be another one. No, there is only one shithole university in the United States, and that is Ohio State University. You don't have to refer to it as the Ohio State University. Go blue, but I digress.
Oh, man.
I digress. The decision to indict Trump remains puzzling to me on these federal charges, and I'm resisting the urge to go political on this case because I'm a lawyer, and I think that evaluating a case on its merits is important. But man, I just can't help but wonder whether the Justice Department is awake at the switch. I mean, reports overnight are that and this I think comes apropos a press conference by Senator Grassley, I think of Iowa, who's been briefed by the FBI, attended the briefing on the CHS at the heart of claims that Biden and his son may have taken bribes from Burisma, and says that the CHS recorded, he's been briefed by the FBI in a closed door proceeding. There are 17 audio tapes that apparently confirm that the Bidens took serious money while Vice President Biden was in fact vice president. And I started to think about that, and I started to think about what the Justice Department chooses to put its resources into. I started to think about that by contrast. I started to think about that with respect to the Durham report as well, and how little it took to launch an investigation of Russian collusion with Donald Trump. It took uncorroborated allegations from Steele in the form of the Steele dossier, which we now know was opposition research, largely financed by the Clinton campaign. There's just a little drop in that pond, and boom, the FBI opens a full investigation of Donald Trump and Russian collusion. We've got a CHS with apparent tapes where you can listen to Joe and his son talking about taking $5 million from a foreign power, and we're choosing to indict Donald Trump for not returning records and for obstruction of justice. I remind, yeah. I'm going to assume he did it. But I mean, the decision to prosecute is one that prosecutors have to make. And there used to be a threshold decision in the Public Integrity Unit about whether bringing the prosecution was in the public interest, was in the public good. Now you got Jack Smith, the humorless one. No one is above the rule of law. Really, Jack? Well, tell me that about Joe and Hunter, and let me listen to those 17 tapes that your CHS has provided you. And how is it that when it comes to Donald Trump, you're quick to the indictment trigger, you're quick to the investigation trigger, but when it comes to Joe Biden, you're willfully blind? And so these are questions I have. I think they're questions plenty of people have. I don't want to. I don't want to make this a podcast that takes political sides and politicizes every prosecution. But in this case, I think questions arise, and bringing this prosecution on the eve of a presidential election strikes me as improvident in the extreme.
So I put the Miami Herald article here on the screen to highlight what I believe is going to be perhaps the next sort of partisan battleground in this case. Judge Eileen Cannon is who was assigned the case in chief. Today's arraignment is obviously not going to be in front of Judge Cannon. It'll be in front of, I think it's, who is it here? Jonathan Goodman. But what we know is that
let me explain that real quick to folks. There are two types of judges. I'm sorry, Mike, to do that, but I just because we're law nerds here and we want people to be better consumers of legal news. Article 3 of the United States Constitution creates judges who are lifetime appointees. Once they are nominated and confirmed by the Senate, they can't be removed. They serve for the rest of their lives. And I am in favor of that because I favor a strong and independent judiciary. And the notion that somehow, this is all I'm going to do now is call balls and strikes within the lines of the Constitution for the remainder of my life, that strikes me as a noble and worthy vocation. Those are Article 3 judges. There are other judges called magistrate judges. Magistrate judges are appointed by Article 3 judges, and they serve subject to reappointment. It's either, I think, 8 years or 10 years. I can't remember the period. Magistrate judges can handle a limited range of responsibilities, including first appearances by criminal defendants, where they are advised of their rights, and pretrial orders and scheduling orders and so forth are set. So notwithstanding whatever controversy there may be regarding Eileen Cannon, the decision to have Trump appear before a magistrate judge, in this case Jonathan Goodman, is routine. I cannot think of a criminal prosecution for a person, no matter how high or low their station, that in my experience was first presented to an Article 3 or lifetime judge. So this is a routine move. If anybody tries to sell you a conspiracy pill relating to Magistrate Judge Jonathan Goodman doing the initial presentation, reject the pill.
Well, I don't think that that's necessarily the conspiracy pill that's being pushed. The conspiracy pill being pushed is this one, which is why I said I think this is going to become the next partisan battleground. So Judge Cannon, as the article notes, is a newer member of the Article 3 courts there for the Southern District of Florida, and she is a Trump appointee. So the assignment to this case is already generating some publicity at the lower levels and is beginning to simmer. So I expect that as we move past these sort of procedural landmarks in the early phases of the case norm, that the opinion pieces from establishment media will begin to hone in on this issue and laying the groundwork for some sort of if the disposition of this case isn't what the I guess the political left wants out of it. It will at least have a scapegoat or a blame game to play with respect to the appointment of this judge and the random assignment thereof to the case.
So let's talk about random assignments. There is a chief administrative judge within every district of the United States District Court. There are 94 of them in smaller states like mine, Connecticut. The state is one district. In Florida, as you've heard, there are multiple districts. So there will be the Southern District of Florida and then an administrative judge. And usually that administrative judge who has responsibility for oversight of the system rotates among the lifetime appointees. In every federal district that I am aware of, cases are randomly assigned as they come in. And so, the United States government gets an indictment returned as to somebody, they file it in court, it goes to the clerk's office, and whether it's a wheel or a random number generator, a device sets it and sends it to a certain court. In this case, and now, does an administrative judge have the ability to override the random assignment? I don't know, candidly. And does it ever happen? I don't know. It would be bad for the system if that were the case, because justice is supposed to be blind. And the notion of random assignment suggests that when you go to court, to use a baseball analogy, because we are pivoting away from basketball to a sport that I can't understand, nobody goes to a baseball game and says, who's calling balls and strikes today? We don't go to see the umpires. We go to see the game. And in court, we don't go to see the judge. We go to see the parties, and we go to see whether the parties can prove their claims. Beware of a courtroom in which a judge's personality becomes something that you talk about. That's a failure of the adversarial system. That's a judge viewing their trial as a vanity project. This is one of the reasons I don't like televised trials. I've had televised trials where judges, sitting there with the camera on them, and there's one notable case where I saw a woman who's carrying maybe a little more weight than she was comfortable with, who, whenever she appeared, in this case, always had her chin down and fresh hairdo and makeup.
More than you were comfortable.
Yeah. But so I think we've got Judge Cannon, who is appointed by Trump, and she's in based on rulings she made in her civil case, in a civil case that she handled over Trump. She's made comments about the scope of the attorney-client privilege. She may revisit some of the decisions that were made with respect to a judge compelling compliance with a grand jury subpoena by Evan Corcoran to reveal certain notes as violating the attorney-client privilege. I mean, she's going to make whatever claims the parties bring to a court. And let's talk about that as well. So right now we've got this indictment, and the indictment says, Donald Trump committed these crimes. The indictment has been presented. Trump will be shown a copy of it. The court will satisfy itself today that he's aware of the charges, and the litigation will begin. And then his lawyers will have the opportunity to do what's called file motions. And you're thinking, what does that mean? Nothing happens in a courtroom until the parties act. The court will set a scheduling order saying, if you want to file motions, you have to do so by such and such a date. And if you don't, trial will begin on such and such a date. That's it. That's what the judge does. Then it's up to the parties to decide what they want to do. So the defense may look at the indictment and think that there are defects in the indictment, and they may challenge the indictment by filing a motion to dismiss. The government is obliged to provide discovery, that is certain information to the defense, such that the defense can prepare for trial. The defense may spot things in the discovery that they think are wrong, and they may bring it to the court's attention by way of a motion. There may be evidence that the defense thinks the government has illegally obtained, or that the government has but shouldn't have, such as notes from Trump's lawyer. They can file a motion to suppress those sorts of statements, and the court they could file a motion for a change of venue, to ask the trial be moved to a different location. The number and type of motions that can be filed are limited basically by the creativity of the lawyers representing Trump, and there can be more or less motion practice.
I want to just point this out as well, because T Girl just made the comment in the Rumble chat, so I want to shine some light there. But do recall that the judge in the Manhattan District Attorney's case against Trump, the business records case, donated a nominal amount of money to the Biden presidential campaign. So it's not as if these issues are without precedent. And I say issues, but that it could also just as well be considered a non-issue. And Freedom Lover makes a remark in Rumble, which I think has some strong appeal here, which he says that they are actually scared of Judge Cannon because it's not an activist judge.
Again, so this, call me naive. I go to court almost every day that I'm not goofing off, and I goof off as many days as I can, but not enough, trust me. I never, in my 30 years of going to court every day, never have thought to myself, who appointed this judge and how is that likely to affect the ruling? Whether I'm in state court, or I'm in federal court, where judges are selected in different ways. I don't think it matters. I don't
either. And I'll say this just from a limited perspective of federal court. My limited experience in federal court has been extraordinary. And I would support exactly what you're saying. The proposition that you're putting out there, Norm, is that it doesn't necessarily matter to the person in the robe. Here in North Carolina, I have not had a single instance of, where I thought to myself that there was something bigger at play.
And this goes to the point about legitimacy here, because, I have loved ones who were distraught when Trump was elected in 2016. I was satisfied. I would have been distraught in the other case. And they were very, very concerned about the fate of the republic, the future of the country. And these concerns grew and obviously reached a crescendo on January 6th. And thereafter. And call me naive, but the institution's held. We still have the same structure of government. We still have the same tensions in our society. We are still resolving our disputes in courtrooms rather than bar rooms or in gunfights. And candidly, our country is far less violent than it has almost ever been in a time of great political tension. You look back at the 60s and think of all the bombings with the Weather Underground. You look at the riots in the 60s. You look at the loss of life in the riots. You look at the FBI's reaction and overreaction to the left. You look at the fact that during the 1960s, we had a run, as I was coming of age, of assassinations. Robert Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, boom, 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 boom. As a young man, I thought, assassinations were part of political life. We're not enduring bombings in the United States. We had a summer of protests that were mostly peaceful, but often turned violent and destructive in 2020. We haven't had the likes of it since. We have an FBI that in my view is out of control and overreacting, and his crushing dissent from the right this time. I think that's a problem, but I don't see violence. I don't see science. I just don't.
Well, and I don't want to get stuck here because this is a topic for another day, but one I think that I've brought up before, and I referenced Justice Thomas in talking about a high-tech lynching, right, during his confirmation process. Yeah. Society has changed such that, Norm, the manner by which silence is achieved is no longer necessary. It doesn't necessitate a body. But let's move on.
Let's move on. And, and I don't want to minimize the divisions in the country. And there is something like an unwinding and an unraveling going on. And it may be that we're getting ready for a critical realignment of parties and that something fundamental is afoot. It may well be. And it may well be that that's just the way it has to be. Let's see what Tucker has to say about it today. Things are heating up with Tucker Carlson and Fox. Apparently, he's now received another cease and desist letter from Fox. I see that he's got Harmeet Dillon on his team. I'm a little disappointed I'm not, but that's all right. He's claiming that somehow the cease and desist and or Fox's regard or treatment of him violates his First Amendment rights. Maybe. I'm not sure I see that. I haven't seen the contract between Fox and Tucker. Tucker's always free to bargain away his right to speak in exchange for money. And if he did so in a contract with Fox, as we said last week, I think right now he's got to make an economic determination. If he's contractually obliged to remain silent, that's not a violation of his First Amendment rights. It might cost him to speak, and maybe he has to do an economic analysis of that contract and decide whether it's worth paying the penalty that he agreed to pay in his contract
Yeah,
for
I think
speech.
that may be, Norm, we talked about remedies on this stream. What was that on Saturday that we talked about remedies, or Friday? I can't recall.
Friday, I think. I don't think we did a Saturday show. Yeah.
Sorry, Sunday. And I've messed that up
It
on
wasn't. Yeah.
the ad for Sunday as well. But anyway, so my thought here is that it's important to point out that courts are extremely reluctant from a remedies perspective to order the performance of one's labor under a contract, because that begins to look like indentured servitude, slavery. So in this instance, I think that even if Fox is claiming to a court, or their legal position is somehow that they stand to be irreparably harmed by Tucker breaching his obligations under the contract, and this is setting aside any arguments that Tucker's legal team may make that the scope of the non-compete, if that's indeed what we're talking about, is unreasonable as to time, territory, and or scope. And I think that third one may be the most vulnerable from Fox News's perspective, the scope of the non-compete. But leaving all the substantive merits aside, I think that Tucker is likely making an economic calculation as to whether it even matters. Is he willing to meet Fox where they are in terms of what they assess to be economic damages? Is he okay, sort of kind of burning that fuel so that he can begin to transition to another platform? I've actually heard rumblings that Tucker may be looking to relaunch something like Periscope, which was at one point Twitter's native live streaming feature that was at one point sort of deactivated and carved off. But I think that this may be an effort to show that, number one, financial incentives aside, he's independently wealthy at this point. He's not necessarily worried about the economic harm. If it comes to a judgment, against him and in Fox's favor, he'll pay the piper. But in the meantime, he's going to continue to do what he needs to do, knowing that a court is unlikely to award Fox with some sort of equitable resolution that requires them to perform under a contract that they themselves have nullified by putting him on the sidelines.
No, and what's more, I don't think that Fox, contract claims are fungible. They can be reduced to dollar amounts, and so they agreed to pay him $25 million. He agreed not to speak. If he speaks, write him a $25 million check.
And that's what I expect is going to be the issue here, right? It's probably just a risk assessment on Tucker's part. Saying,
so here's what I hope he doesn't do today. So he's going to talk episode 3 of his new Tucker on Twitter, I guess. Is that what he calls it? Tucker on Twitter. Episode 3 will be his take on the Trump indictment. I hope he doesn't go all in on the deep state and doing the bidding of George Soros's son, who at 37 is apparently taking over the Soros clan, for and its interest on behalf of Dad, who's rumored to be ill and is suffering ADitis and is presumably on his way off this mortal coil at some point in the not too distant future. I think that you can talk about an administrative state. You can talk about problems with the structure and function of government without going all in on, and you can question the wisdom of deciding to prosecute Trump on the eve of a presidential election. I still think this will go down in history as one of the stupidest decisions the Justice Department has ever made with respect to its charging decisions. You can do all of that without going all in on good versus evil. And I'm hoping that Tucker takes a more nuanced approach. In his second episode on Twitter, I thought he was doing pretty well at the start and pretty well at the end, but he kind of lost me in the middle, and he's trying too hard. And I think that's one of the things we all need to avoid doing at a time of disruption in our lives, and a time when there's no real common narrative. Let's not all try so hard to make sense of it all. Let's not all try so hard to be right. Let's all try to listen to what others are saying and what they're doing, and try to walk a moment in their shoes with an aim at coming up at some common ground. My wife recommended that I read some book, trying to remember the name of it, and I did, on loving one another or something like that. It was a fellow who talked about the need for overcoming contempt, in American life. And so there's a tendency on social media to react. I'll call it the skeet shooting theory of public debate. You say something, bam! Did I get it? Now, rather than shooting at the target the minute it's launched, why not take a moment and ask yourself, what's the person trying to accomplish by launching the target? And rather than looking at each assertion online as something that is in the occasion for warfare, look at it as a hand extended to you and try to meet that hand halfway. It may be that in the end, you just want to slap the person anyhow, but you owe it to yourself, you owe it to the country, you owe it to a sense of the common good to listen to the other side. And I'm hoping that Tucker will avoid making the indictment of Trump into some cosmic contest between good and evil. It's a bad charging decision that's going to rebound poorly for the country's welfare, but it's no more than that. But let's see what Tucker has to say.
Well, and as it relates to Tucker's future, I do encourage anyone who is within earshot of this stream to go to Adam Carolla's podcast and listen to what I believe was a rebroadcast or a republishing of a one-on-one sit-down between Adam Carolla and Tucker Carlson. And what Tucker Carlson admires a tremendous amount about Adam Carolla is much of what I admire about Adam, but Tucker does realize that one needs to be independently networked in this day and age, and that is something that he is endeavoring to do. So this is phase one, maybe sort of the beta phase of what he is aiming to do. So I have high expectations. Freedom Lover says that he can't wait for Tucker to reemerge with his own show. I'm simply saying that he already has, and sure, I'm sure the episodes will be more than 10 minutes long. But I also think that there is a bit of game theory here in action. This is sort of a call and response. This is a hunter laying in wait. He has baited a trap, and he's looking to see when he can take his best shot. And for now, we'll have to live with some of these more maybe ethereal appeals to guard your taboos and that kind of stuff until he gets to a position where he can reemerge in a fuller form, I think. And photography, to your point, photography says, I don't miss Tucker's childish, giddy laughing at his guests. And I responded there in the YouTube chat that I agree, it's a bit cheap, but I also think that is a relic of what Fox News needed him to do in order to appease sort of the middle of the bell curve that is their base.
And I'm looking at a comment on Rumble. Lawyer Will, Trump haters don't seem to actually believe in overcoming contempt. Yeah, there's fault on both sides. I get it. I do. I also know the following. As soon as this broadcast is over, I'll be leaving the house, hopping in my car, heading to an office where I will depend on the regard of strangers to survive the day. I don't expect that I'll be shot dead leaving the house or that people will randomly run into me at streetlights. In fact, I expect that they'll obey streetlights. I'll go to a restaurant today, perhaps for lunch, and order a sandwich, and I don't expect, and I don't really even think I have to worry about being poisoned. Just stop in the course of the day today and in your interactions and marvel at how much you trust people around you. And then ask yourself, what are you going to do to increase those conditions of trust? I think the point of the book on contempt is eliminating contempt from your responses might build a bridge. So do the Trump haters respond with contempt to him? Yes, they do. And so the temptation is to contempt back, but that's a walk down a road that leads ultimately to violence. And we could get there if we want to. I myself choose to live in a community where I can trust those around me to go about the business of daily living. And I'm looking for ways to build that trust. And I'm encouraging all of you to do so as well. So here's the challenge today. When you see on social media or in your daily life, someone hit your button, press your button where you want to respond by saying F you, or you want to engage in some snark, maybe turn to the person and say, why do you say that? And then count to 60 and listen to what they have to say. You may hate them in the end anyhow, but by building small habits of listening, you might build a larger community that you choose to live in and you'd care to live in. My fear is the road we're on now is a road to self-destruction. American Psycho Redux.
Yeah. So before we get out of here, I at least wanted to acknowledge that this is one of the leading items that we wanted to discuss today, and you've already alluded to some of the facts at issue. This does appear to me sort of, the foundation rooted in narcissism is hard to miss when one considers what the Biden family has its hands in. And again, I go back to
but let's be careful. Okay, so let's illustrate this point about contempt. The Durham report on the Steele dossier is that the Justice Department leapt because it got confirmation bias. Trump bad, Russians bad, Trump Russia bad, bad, bad. Let's open a full-scale investigation. And they did so, and it turns out that there was far less there than met the eye, and Justice Department looks bad. They've now leapt as to Donald, as to this corruption thing. That may be a better case than the Russian intrusion was. We've got now, with respect to the CHS and the Bidens, preliminary information that suggests that Biden may have taken a bribe from Burisma. But the Justice Department hasn't done here what it did to Trump with the Steele dossier. It hasn't launched into a full investigation and gone to the airwaves. It's fought this. In the preliminary stages, they're trying to corroborate this information. I'm not going to say trust and obey. I'm going to say watch, observe, and press. I want answers, but I'm not going to reach the conclusion yet that he's been bribed. I want to know more, and I want my Justice Department to spend its resources on that rather than the Trump fiasco.
Well, I understand, and I think what is obvious here is that now Vivek Ramaswamy's criticism and his appeal on CNN that we played yesterday, telling the host of whatever show he appeared on,
Dana Bash, CNN, yeah,
that there needs to be an answer given to what Biden has told the DOJ and what the DOJ has told to Jack Smith. And in this case, it seems as though our broad critique of the use of CHS is now under a microscope in a different context, because if we are to be consistent, Norm, we have to acknowledge the difficulty of the CHS problem. And these audio tapes come allegedly from a CHS that basically said I needed some sort of dirt. I needed some sort of insurance.
Yeah, no. Right. Let's find out more. Hey,
and according to those who are close to it, so that being, Chuck Grassley, Marjorie Taylor Greene, this CHS is among the, and of course they have every reason to say this because of the reason I'm bringing this up. But, according to them, this CHS is among the most credible, the most credentialed from within the national intelligence world prior to pushing this stuff and becoming a whistleblower.
Well, let's learn more before we leave. But let me leave you this, folks. If you're driving today and you need some fun thought, something to think about this. When Whitey Bulger was a young man doing federal time in Kentucky, the CIA had a secret program known as MK Ultra. And they were trying to determine better ways to control minds, overcome inhibitions, and get at information they thought necessary to the national security. So they got involved in research with psychedelics. And this was organized by a doctor named Sidney Gottlieb, not a medical doctor, a chemist. They got themselves hooked up with a bunch of prisoners in Kentucky and said, we'll give you some good time if you'll participate in our mind control research. And Whitey Bulger, then a young strapping mobster in the making, said, I do. And he signed up to be administered LSD. And I think he did like 15 consecutive straight days of being dosed with LSD. Query: what was it like to be on acid as Whitey Bulger? Think about that today when you're looking for something fun to talk about. And maybe tomorrow we'll talk about the Unabomber's participation in the MK Ultra project as well.
I feel like this is something that you have a unique insight on. So I definitely want to bring that to the listeners.
Well, I don't know that it's unique. There's a book. Let me, as always, there's a book, right? It's called, doggone it. It's not called Oh Doggone It. I'll get it to you in a moment. It's called Poisoner in Chief, Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA's Search for Mind Control by Stephen Kinzit. Kinzer, Kinzer. I'm reading that book right now, and it's blowing my mind, even without LSD. We'll talk about that and more when we come back tomorrow.
Absolutely. We're live 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. We thank everybody for being here, and we're loving the engagement. Norm, I know you can feel it. It's growing every single day. Thank you very much for being here. So if you're a newcomer, welcome to a really engaging community. You can find us on Twitter at Pattis Podcast. That is where we want most of our attention to go right now. We do broadcast and stream live on Twitter Live every day. You can also catch us here on Rumble Live and YouTube Live. And if you're unable to tune into the live streams one way or the other, we're available in podcast form almost immediately after the streams are over. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, etc. Leave us 5 stars there, or don't leave us anything, but we appreciate the support. Norm, go ahead, get on your horse. I will see you tomorrow morning.
See you tomorrow, Luttrell. You were in at 7:49, first one in this morning. Let's see who can beat Luttrell tomorrow. Talk to you tomorrow, folks.
Bye.